Many people are confused when it comes to ADA compliance and website accessibility. And beyond the topic having multiple layers, the marketplace can be quite confusing. So on the whiteboard behind me, I have most of the common terms you'll come across, and then I also have some lines pointing showing how everything relates to one another. So let's start off with the plaintiff's lawyer, right? Because most often people enter this space and they start researching because they have been sued. And so the plaintiff's lawyer will initiate litigation against a website owner, and then a website owner will react. They want to prevent the demand letter, they want to prevent any additional lawsuits, and they really want to try to get rid of the current litigation, but usually that's not going to happen. So the website owner is then dealing with this lawsuit or demand letter. It almost always results in a settlement, and then they continue on and they want to prevent that from happening again. So that's where we get a lot of the market participants entering in with, we have various sellers, and there are different vendors and companies, there are different offerings, and everyone is selling something. Most of the accessibility providers are selling something under the label or under the idea that it will prevent further litigation, that it will help you be in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act or potentially other anti-discrimination laws. So with preventing lawsuits and demand letters, I have this connected to, first, there are overlay widgets being installed. What's important to know about an overlay widget is it is something where it is sold as an instant solution that will make your website accessible, it will make your website ADA compliant, and it will prevent litigation. Well, empirically and objectively, we know that that is not the case, but they are still nevertheless sold as solutions, and so they exist in the marketplace. There are also custom overlays. Custom overlays are similar in that they lay over a website. So custom overlays are made specific for that website, but they still don't actually make the underlying website accessible. And when you are working with accessibility, that is very important to know. You want to make your website itself, the code and the content, accessible. It's not enough just to have something that lays over it, that renders adjustments. What you want to do is have a fundamentally accessible website. Another offering is premium scans. So there are free scans that are readily available, and then there are paid scans. And so what the paid scans will offer are not only the scans, but a dashboard, customizable reports, and then I have later here fancy reports. So you can do a lot of things with scans. You can sort by different what are called success criteria, or basically accessibility considerations or requirements under the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are technical standards for accessibility. But basically with premium scans, you have everything that can be caught by automation, that can be flagged by automation, and that will be presented to you, and you can run as many scans as you want. You can run scans on unlimited pages, and so that's really the sell there. But it's really important to know that scans are limited, so the entities that are selling scans, they really don't paint the picture of just how limited scans are. So let me give you this. About 25% of WCAG 2.1 AA issues can be flagged by a scan. So they're not conclusive. Some people call them ADA compliance checkers. They're not ADA compliance checkers. They are helpful. Scans are helpful. And nice reports are always good, right? Everybody likes to have great graphics and pie charts and all of that. But when it comes to preventing lawsuits and demand letters, there's very much a hard ceiling on what scans can do. So while they're helpful, they're not conclusive, and we definitely need to do a lot more than just run a scan and fix the issues that are identified by a scan. The problem with premium scans is almost all of the features in those premium scans can be found in paid scans, and there's really not too much difference unless you want to scan pages that are behind a login. So if you want to run scans on authenticated pages, then you may want to pay for one, but the value is really, especially for what they're charging for these, it's really, it's a weak value. So I talked about fancy reports. Then there's also monitoring. So monitoring is the result of a scan. If a scan returns, if a new issue is, accessibility issue is flagged, let's say they're running an interval scans every week and then a new issue is flagged, then you will get an update. But again, we're back to the limitations of scans, and we really, if you're to the point where you're monitoring, you really shouldn't have any accessibility issues existing anyway, because you're to this point where you're looking for any possible accessibility issue and you're going to fix that immediately as soon as you find it. In most cases, there's just little practical value in monitoring. Now, other terms I have that have a line from prevent lawsuit, prevent demand letter, include consulting and audits and support and remediation. So with consulting, you're talking with somebody about accessibility, how to approach it, what they need to be aware of, what you need to be aware of, etc. A consultant is going to help guide your efforts. I recommend consulting through the right people. Most consultants are really going to help you with pure accessibility, and it's not going to be as much about preventing litigation. It's more going to be about, here's how you approach accessibility, here are the things you want to know, and that's very similar to support. So whereas consulting is like a 1-hour session, with support usually you have something ongoing such as an audit and remediation, and then there's support to help you along the way. And so I just mentioned an audit and remediation. An audit is a formal evaluation that in theory will actually detect all of the accessibility issues for whatever is in scope for the audit. So if the scope is, let's say, 10 URLs, the audit is going to span those 10 URLs and then tell you all of the accessibility issues that exist on that audit per WCAG 2.1 AA. And then with remediation, we're just fixing all of the issues that are found in the audit. Now, I've mentioned WCAG multiple times. It stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are technical standards for accessibility, and they are frequently referenced to determine whether or not a website is accessible. And many plaintiffs' lawyers look to these standards and to determine whether or not an accessibility issue exists. So the best practice for ADA compliance and really compliance with any law is to be fully WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. So that's where we want to strive to. As a website owner, you want to get to this place, but first you want to prevent lawsuits and prevent demand letters. So there's a way to approach accessibility in which you reduce your risk of litigation as you work towards accessibility. So that's really important, is how you approach this. You want to do so strategically and intelligently, and that's why I talked about some of the shortcoming of consulting, is because consultants that are pure accessibility consultants, they're not going to be familiar with exactly and precisely how to approach so as to reduce risk of litigation as you are going. They probably have an idea, but again, it's not going to be completely aligned with preventing litigation. They're going to be very helpful if you need help on, hey, let's look at my website, let's review my website, what accessibility issues am I looking at, what do I need to address my objectives, etc. That's where they'll be helpful. But most of the offerings in the marketplace are not truly aligned with preventing litigation. Almost all of them are sold under the pretense that they will prevent lawsuits and they will make you ADA compliant. But when we talk about ADA compliance, there's really technical ADA compliance, and so best practices would be full WCAG conformance and would be having an accessibility statement published conspicuously on the website with multiple contact methods for feedback and support. So that's technically what is best for ADA compliance for websites. But then there's practical compliance, and that's what most people are referring to. How do I actually stop these complaints and demand letters? Because there's quite a few companies that have been sued multiple times, and there are about 20 plaintiffs' law firms that are fairly active to extremely active in this space. And so they are initiating litigation quite often. And so most website owners are concerned with, how do I prevent lawsuits? And then ultimately, I think many website owners, many website operators do want to make their digital experiences accessible. Many understand that beyond litigation and beyond compliance, this is actually a plus for their business. So they want to get there, but first they want to prevent litigation. And so that is really not what the market's offering. And we know this because we continually see litigation, and it's not a lack of resources, because I just published a video a day ago on how billion-dollar companies are still being sued just in the last 2 months. So I'm recording this in late August 2023. Just in July and just in August, there were 11 billion-dollar companies sued, and I covered those in the video. And then I realized I left out another company. But the point is that the market offerings are not working for preventing a lawsuit, and that's just because they're not. That's not their specialty. That's not what they're designed for. And really, it's because nobody is aligning themselves with what the plaintiff's lawyers are looking for. They're aligning themselves typically with audits, which is fine. The audits are great. They're recommended. That's what you're going to need for full WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, because an audit is, in theory, going to find all of the accessibility issues on your website. Now, I say in theory because it depends on the quality of audit and who's actually auditing. But that's why there's a misalignment, and that's why we continually see lawsuits despite people paying for various accessibility products and services. It's because they're not aligned. So I mentioned WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. Once you get there, you want to stay there. So you don't want to spend all of this money on accessibility and invest time and energy and really resources, so having your staff, your contractors work on accessibility and then not remain accessible. So once you get to WCAG 2.1 AA conformance, you want to stay there. So that is the last part in my very rudimentary flow chart, from plaintiff's lawyers to website owner to preventing litigation to WCAG conformance, and then you want to remain conformant. So what I recommend is training, and my ADA compliance course and my WCAG course are perfect for the answer to all of this. Really, that's what I've designed them for. So with the ADA compliance course, it's going to tell you exactly how to prevent litigation. What I've done with the ADA compliance course, I've taken the most commonly claimed accessibility issues, and then for each issue, I have a lesson, and it explains how to find that issue and then how to fix that issue, and there are code examples. And then with the WCAG course, I explain the web content accessibility guidelines in plain English. There are, for each lesson, there is a video explanation as well as a text explanation. There are also curated resources. This is going to get you right to the point to where anybody that goes through this course is going to be able to understand not only web accessibility, but the principles in the web content accessibility guidelines are going to apply to other digital assets beyond web assets, beyond websites. So it's going to help you with mobile app accessibility, etc. But this way you train your team, so you're not introducing issues. You can become fully WCAG 2.1 AA conformant because you're going to work through the issues. And then you're also going to make sure to prevent litigation because you are going to be aligned with what accessibility issues plaintiffs' lawyers are looking for. In the courses, I talk all about strategy, prioritization, things you need to be aware of, the resources that I make available. So there are supplements that include cheat sheets, Excel spreadsheet checklists. I mean, everything is devised from me. I've studied this space now for 5+ years, and I've seen people over and over again, they're wasting money and they're wasting time, and sometimes it's not necessarily waste. Like, some things are useful, right? I've talked about many of these things. Consulting, I still recommend consulting. Consulting is great. It helps people beyond the courses. But audits are still helpful for conformance. Support is still helpful when you're working through issues. Remediation is always necessary, right? All of these things are great, but what you need to focus in on are these issues that the plaintiff's lawyers are looking for, and you need to take immediate action. It doesn't have to be perfect action to significantly reduce your risk of litigation, but it does need to be immediate, and you need to make sure that you're getting it mostly right, so that as you are working on accessibility, you are reducing your risk of litigation. And then once you have that sense of relief from working through the lessons and taking action, then you can continue on to full WCAG conformance. So that's the steps, right? In order, you want to prevent litigation, and then you want to make your digital assets fully accessible. So I highly recommend starting with the ADA compliance course. I highly recommend the WCAG course. And if you need consulting, there are many great consultants out there. You can also hire me for consulting through accessible.org. But this is the website accessibility and ADA compliance space. And I think now now that you have context for each of these different elements in play, I think now it makes much more sense.